Hi, and welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Drew.
And this week we are talking about Omega Men.
1 through 12.
All of it. Okay, so we are going to talk about this whole thing. This is Omega Man 1 through 12.
Whole damn thing.
Whole thing. Tom King, Bagenda, I don't know. Did the art on most of it. I think there was a guest artist on at least one issue, maybe a couple, but
there's one I remember it was like number 4 or something kind of stood out. So.
Right. Mostly the same team throughout, though. I guess let's do like we normally do and start with just a basic, like, what was it, I guess?
Sure. There are these 6 planets within this universe or solar system or whatever, and there's the group governing them all is corrupt, imagine that, and then there's a group of rebels called the Omega Men, and there's a lot of religious stuff going on between the Alpha and the Omega.
Right. And basically, like, Kyle Rayner goes in. They have one of the whole, like, leave your ring at the door kind of things with the Green Lanterns, so he thinks he can show up and like, be a mediary, right?
Sure.
Leaves his ring, and then he gets abducted by the Omega Man and slowly embroiled within their plans and plots. So this is Tom King. We've liked a lot of Tom King stuff. We love the Vision. That's number 1. Sheriff of Babylon, also very high on our list. Batman's been kind of middling. What else have we read by Tom King?
I think you've read Grayson.
Grayson, yeah, a lot of that's Tom King, and that's pretty much it. But we have a pretty high opinion of Tom King, and I think most of the internet does too. It seems like he's kind of the new internet darling.
Definitely.
So let's just start out with general impression of the book. Did you like it? Where do you put it? You know, in the Tom
King spectrum.
Yeah.
Well, for me, Vision's probably number 1, and Sheriff's like a close second. I would put this 3rd. It's better than Batman.
Right.
Yeah. By a lot.
It's certainly better than Batman. I agree. I think I like it better than Grayson as well. It's pretty good. How did you feel about it then, outside of a Tom King work, just as a work? What's your general impression before we start digging into it further?
I mean, if it was still out, I would put it on the poll.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really good. You know, there's a lot of not so subtle analogous things for like current problems, and I don't even know if I can call them current problems because they've been going on for like fucking ever. Right. You know, and I guess the idea of it being like future in space and all that, and they're still dealing with that shit. But I just really fell in love with the characters is what it came down to. Yeah. The characters are really what this whole thing rides on. So let's break down into it then. So writing wise, what do you think the strong points are here with this series? What makes it so likable that so many people keep recommending it? Everywhere you go on the internet, everybody seems to recommend this series. Why do you think that is? Well, I think the general plot and everything is sufficiently weighty. I mean, it doesn't feel goofy in any way. I think it explores multiple sides to the proposed issue with sincerity, you know? Even like the bad guy, like at one point gets a chance to be like, at multiple points gets a chance to sort of, you know, show his side, and it's not just exposing how diabolical he is. Like, he really in his mind feels that he has justification for like doing the things that he's done. So that, you know, paired with the fantastic characters and the great interpersonal dialogue, you know, the group dynamic, the team dynamic that they have is amazing. Probably one of the best team things I've read from DC.
I think one important thing is that it starts out with a really strong hook for anyone familiar with Kyle Rayner as a character. So I understand especially why a lot of DC fans, people who are invested in DC, really take a liking to this. Because Kyle Rayner is a very popular character in the first place. He's you know, he's an artist, he draws.
He was a comic book artist who got to become a Green Lantern.
Right, you know.
White Lantern, whatever.
Well, green originally, but yeah, so I think the hook early on with him is what really gets its claws in you first. Like this idea of they've apprehended him and like put this bomb in his neck, right? It's got this Suicide Squad feel,
which they like tip the hat to later.
Is intentional. Like, yeah. And there's a few other things that they do that with that I like that he's done. The hypnos that they use at one point, he makes this offhand comment about how he sold it to some guy from Earth for a shoe, and how that was, you know, such a good deal for him, but that's where all the Grayson stuff spins off. The entire Spiral agent organization, they all use the Hypnos technology to keep people from seeing them. So
it reminded me of the what's that Schwarzenegger movie? Get Your Ass Back to Mars.
Total Recall.
Total Recall.
Yeah,
a little bit.
So from a DC perspective, there's a lot of little nods to a lot of other things going on that's done in a way that doesn't feel heavy or forced. It just fun pieces of that universe sprinkled in.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I had to go read something else to understand it.
Right, exactly.
Which is what pisses me off.
Which is always the best way to do things,
exactly.
I think.
Yeah.
And then I think you're right. A lot of, from there, what keeps it interesting is that it's nuanced. There's no... I mean, clearly you're rooting, you know, for Kyle, I suppose, but there's no real good guy, bad guy scenario per se. Like very early on, we have the thing where they just leave the 4,000 people to die, right? So right at the beginning, you're like, okay, they're not squeaky clean characters, and they have kidnapped Kyle Rayner and put a bomb in his neck, so they're kind of dicks.
And the princess, like, I never, like, began to trust her.
Right.
Like,
she was never
ever.
Cool. Right.
Yeah.
And it continues throughout. And actually, I think the further you read, the less clear it becomes. Like, it actually gets murkier as you move towards the end, whereas with most, especially DC books, you know, as you move...
current age.
Yeah, as you move towards the end of the story, it all clarifies, and the winners and losers and good guys and bad guys all kind of come to light. And this eschews that completely and says, no, forget that. It's not good writing.
Right. It's not realistic.
Yeah. And it also is pretty ambitious, right? What he's trying to do here, like the last few issues, day 27, day 28, like every panel is another day, and there's like this long period of time that you're following.
It's just a battle.
Right, it's just war. You know, he's trying to show like actual war occurring.
Not to mention he built like quite a fucking universe within 12 issues. I mean, we have a lot of characters at the forefront. We have originally 6 planets to kind of keep track of and their inhabitants and all that. And like, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot. It's dense. It
is dense, and I think that's my main criticism of it. That
it was going into it. Like the first few issues, there was a lot of moments where it's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll just continue on.
Yeah, you just have to take a lot of things at face value and say, okay, I hope that this will make sense later.
And it did,
for the most part.
But I can understand being somebody that just picked up issue 1 and thought, whatever.
Yeah. So, what are the high points here then? Do you have any specific things that happened during the series that like you really liked about it specifically?
See, most of the top things that I came away with were just certain characters that I really liked. Like I really liked the Dr. Robot.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Scrapper was super cool. Again, I liked how the princess like never... Even like when you found out she was like on their side and everything, like you never really like begin to trust her, and at the very end it's like, well, I fucking shouldn't have.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and interestingly, like that character, they do make you somewhat sympathetic to her plight. Like I felt like I understood where she was coming from and why she was the way she was.
I just kept waiting for her to double cross people like at any moment.
Right, but she never had to, which I think is maybe the most well-written piece of this whole thing, is that she never did double-cross anyone, right? So
Kyle.
Well, but not really.
It was part of the plan originally, but yeah, she made efforts to like gain his trust and everything, and presented herself as a different piece of the puzzle than she actually was.
That's true. I mean, you know, she was duplicitous.
Sure.
I think that's a word.
Yeah, I think so too.
But you know, she never like came back, and there was no grand tricky plan that was going to screw everybody else on the team over.
Yeah.
Right. And throughout this, The one thing that is surprising with all the characters is that they never really do that to each other, which I kept expecting, like for somebody to be the turncoat or you know, to have some larger plan that's gonna screw up the main plan. But he didn't go that route, and I think that makes for a more interesting read, but harder to write. So. In some ways, because, you know, he didn't take any of the easy way outs, I did feel like it was a little scattershot at times. Because we would just jump, like, you know, instead of a simple, like, group dynamic plot that's very focused on their interpersonal, like a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of thing, which is what I more expected going in. We got more of this political drama. So we from issue to issue, we do a lot of jumps in time and from one location to another that I think maybe brought it down, you know, to the level where I'm with you. It's like somewhere in the middle of my interest of his works. Just in that, for a big political, like, war drama, I don't know how you could get around it in 12 issues.
Right. Which I don't know that he thought he was going to have 12 issues of it going in. You know, so there's that. But that being said, I mean, I think the second half of it was probably my favorite, you know. Yeah,
the second half was much stronger than the first. As we get kind of the turn with the characters, somewhere near the end of the first trade, right, we start to see the real motives. We find out it's not a bomb. Right. And once we get from that moment on where he's... there's the one moment where he's standing over the princess after it's crashed, and he kind of pulls her out. I think that was supposed to be symbolic or indicative of where we were moving from there, where he's gone from, you know, the observer of the problem to the one who's now going to try to solve it, which I wasn't sure if we were ever going to get that. You know, the first whole trade, I wasn't sure if maybe he was just going to be more of an observer. That we were watching it all happen from his perspective, but he does end up kind of taking control and things actually get murkier once he's in charge, right? And once he kind of takes the reins, it gets less clear, like what's right and what's wrong, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And really, even when he takes charge, I think the princess is still really the one manipulating what's happening.
In charge. Right. It's all kind of her master plan from the beginning. Also, the ending, I really like the ending. I think the ending was one of the strong points of the whole thing, where we see... He actually goes ahead and shows us what happens a little bit down the line, right? He's having kind of sort of a debriefing.
Right. This person did this. This person did this. We still have this problem. What are we going to do about it?
It never really... It didn't really solve anything. You just created whole new problems, which I think was also a really bold choice on Tom King's part. But being his CIA background, I can understand why he would take that route in telling this story, because obviously, you know, each solution has its own problems.
Just create more problems. Yeah. Take out a dictator and his successor is probably worse.
Right. So, how about artistically, what did you think of it?
The guest artist issue, I remember not really liking.
Really? I kind of liked the guest artist issue.
Yeah, I thought it looked a little bit too goofy.
Yeah, it was a little... It was really... pretty abstract.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of almost Picasso-esque pages where, you know, things are contorted. I was reading this sitting next to my wife, and she looked over while I was reading that issue. She said, "That lady looks weird." Like, what is this, you know?
Yeah.
Which was an apt statement, because she did. Like, the characters looked really strange in that issue, very warped, and but I liked it. But aside from that one,
I liked everything else a lot better. It almost reminded me of Descender a little bit, which I thought was cool.
Interestingly, Dustin Nguyen did a lot of those covers.
Did he?
Yeah. So all of the propaganda covers, I'm pretty sure those were all him. Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
Must have had like a buddy in art school that's the artist?
Baginda?
Yeah.
Baginde?
Vagina. Similar styles. And also... most of the paneling was pretty standard, but they had like a few clever tricks here and there, like when there were still panels, but then it was just like a one solid picture behind it. That was really cool. And then we get like the whole metaphor about paneling and stuff later from Kyle Rayner, which yeah, it's like extra perspective on that. So I thought it was good.
Yeah, I did too. It actually, the paneling reminded me a lot of 80s DC work. I could tell that he's a fan of, especially Watchmen. You see a lot of Dave Gibbons' influence on this series in both just the artistic style, like how the characters look and how backgrounds and things look, but more in the paneling. We have a whole lot of the like 12 panel stuff that Gibbons did all over the place. 9 panel, like he did a lot of these grid like that, again, like you said, Kyle Rayner ends up talking about these, you know, bars like being stuck behind the bar away from the actual story. And you see that throughout, and it's well used here, I think. There's a lot of times in this where the timing is, I feel like, is really important in how the story moves. Almost more important than like what's being said, or the dialogue is sometimes
keeping track of what the hell
conversational in a lot of ways, and a lot of, you know, keeping track of the beats are in the paneling pace and speed. Like we have early on, there's almost the very first issue, I think, near the end, where Kyle's putting the blood on his shirt, and we have that 12 panel that really slows down the pace. And we see that a lot throughout this, where they slow down the pace by just breaking it into a lot of panels and then speed it back up with, you know, 3 panel bang, 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 you know. Or like you were talking about, the 3 panel and splitting it. Right, so it's very quick because it's just one image split. There was a lot of thought, I felt like, in how the paneling was laid out, even though it was helpful. A very old school style paneling. So overall, who would you recommend this to? I like to do this when we do the trade reviews.
Yeah, well, the book itself was for like teen plus or something. I'd say that's pretty apt. I mean, I don't know, maybe teen is a bit young. I don't mean that because of like visual whatever, like graphicness. Just I think it takes somebody with a little bit slower approach to things to really appreciate what's going on.
Yeah, it's a slow read. Although I wouldn't put this in the same pantheon as a lot of the stuff that we hold pretty dearly from DC, like The Question and Saga of the Swamp Thing and Animal Man and things like that. I do think it's probably geared towards the same audience as those, the more reserved and thoughtful works as compared to like the bombastic action-oriented things. It's
probably somebody that reads a lot of Image, honestly.
Yeah, Image, but Vertigo is what I was thinking as well. I'm surprised this wasn't a Vertigo title, actually.
I think it probably would have lasted longer if they'd put it on Vertigo. Which makes me sad to say.
I really think it probably would have been better without the Kyle Rayner connection. We probably could have had a completely different character in there that is kind of like a Green Lantern, and may have given him more room to breathe with it a little bit, but I mean, it still works well within the DC continuity.
Sure. And again, there were some, you know, very nice little nods to different things, and they probably couldn't have done that as well on Vertigo.
Right.
So it would have been a trade-off, but
yeah, I
probably would have got more issues of it, and I would have liked that.
Right, so. Right. My biggest critique is that I do not feel like 12 issues was quite enough for it.
To tell the story.
Yeah, I feel like the story was condensed down. It probably needed another 6 issues or so that they could have fleshed this out. I felt like the last 3 issues felt
just kinda
like they should have been 7 or 8 issues, but they were just crammed down to kind of... It didn't ruin the ending, but it really... Although
the impact wasn't as great as it could have been.
Yeah, the storytelling was still great. You know, it still felt nice to read, but yeah, it was less impactful because of the rushed tone of the end.
Right. But there was something, I mean, usually when endings get rushed like that, they end up being like total garbage. So the fact that he still managed to tell a good story is pretty cool. Yeah, I agree. All in all, this is a pretty great title. I would recommend it to most people that have interests similar to ours. If you tend to like what we talk about on the pull list, you should probably read this. It's coming out in trade. Like, the first one's out. The second one, I think, comes out in like a week or 2. So, there you go. Awesome. Yeah. Later.